Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Modern Sales Pros panel discussion on how to speed up your team's close process, sponsored
Woo!
by our friends at RevOps. Before we jump into this, we've got some great panelists here, some first timers and some founders on here. So, Mark and Adam, welcome. Pete, welcome back. Excited to have you all
Hello.
here. One of the things that we like to do is we learn a little bit more about our panelists is ask a question that's not, you're great. We're gonna have a great conversation, but let's learn a little bit more about who you are as a person. So Mark, what is the next vacation that you've got planned? Where are you excited to travel once you can?
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. So we actually took our first vacation in nearly 2 years. We just came back from Costa Rica, which was
Wow.
amazing. Pura Vida, did some zip lining. It was awesome. So our next vacation, we're going to head out to the West Coast. We're going to be in Santa Barbara for a week. So I'm looking forward to that.
Nice.
But we're still kind of getting used to getting our sea legs in terms of traveling. Got to make up for lost time. So we'll see. But that's the next one that's planned.
Excellent. That
Nice.
sounds like good fun. Pete, how about you? Where are you excited to take the fam for the next go around?
I think that the biggest thing or like the big one that we're excited about is getting back to New York. My wife is a graphic designer and kind of interior design kind of person, and so she's been having like New York withdrawal. And plus like Atrium has a bunch of customers out there, so like to visit them and get drinks and what have you. So I think New York is going to be the big one.
Let me know when you're here. I'll take you around.
Yeah, buddy.
Love it. Look at this. We're making travel plans here. Come for the discussion about Deal Desk and stay for all the tips about New York. Love it.
That's right.
And then last but certainly not least, to Adam, travel plans. Where are you excited to head to?
Oh man, we're trying to plan another epic trip, hopefully by the end of the year, or early next year, to Japan. So
Oh, wow.
we just we're city dwellers, and so we love going to other cities, and so travel via the food. The food in Tokyo is just so good. So I can't wait.
I've heard, and Adam, it sounds like you've been there before, but maybe you can confirm this for me. I've heard that they've got the best pizza on earth in Tokyo.
I didn't know that. Wow.
I didn't know that. That's going to be on my list.
I've heard that from some extreme foodies, because the presentation and the whole effort behind it is it's like pizza perfected, which I'm curious.
As a New Yorker, I take exception to that.
It's like Jiro Dreams of Sushi Pizza Edition. The perfectest, most perfect pizza.
He's worked for 80 years on it. All right, folks. Well, we can stick around for the travel tips. Obviously, we've got 3 amazing panelists joining us today. But today's session is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those, that's a great point, Dominic. The perfect pizza is the one in front of you. I love it. Words of wisdom. In addition to having great sessions like this, Modern Sales Pros is a very large and active community. Our mission is to create an environment for our community members that answer the questions that they may otherwise struggle to solve on their own, and help them see around corners that they may not otherwise know are coming up. We have great sessions like the one that you're going to join today. We have a variety of programming coming up in the next couple of weeks and months. And then hopefully at some point in time, maybe in this year, we'll get back to some of the in-person events so you can meet some new folks as well. Everything we do is free for community members, and those of you who aren't, you'll be invited to join afterwards. But as I mentioned at the outset, today's session wouldn't be possible without the team at RevOps. I'm going to hand it off to Adam to say just a few words about RevOps. Adam?
Yeah, thanks. Super excited here. Well, RevOps is on a mission to really help take the guesswork out of the paperwork as you're building those quotes and proposals and sending them to everybody. So it actually comes from a Confluence template we had built at Twilio. And so really excited to kind of take that together and show you guys how it works.
And for those of you who aren't aware, we've also got a pretty awesome promo going on with the team at RevOps, where Mark, what is it? It's, I think, 90% off your first 6 months.
That's correct.
So for those of you who are on the fence or like, oh, I really do love living in spreadsheets, go ahead and take advantage of that.
No.
No,
No,
spreadsheets, CPQ, all those dirty words. We don't want any of that. And the link is right there in the chat panel for those of you who are interested. But Adam, thank you for that. And now let's get a chance to learn a little bit more about our panelists before we jump into our content here today. Adam, you mentioned the story at Twilio, but it'd be good to get a little bit of background on you, and then same thing, Mark and Pete.
Yeah, so my background is all in billing and payments from Twilio and Stripe, but more importantly, the experiences I've had with Deal Desk and working with Deal Desk teams. So we're really excited about kind of how I can bring some of that knowledge here today.
Yeah, so my name is Mark. I am the head of marketing at RevOps. Been with the company for about a year now. Over the last 12 months, I've had some really great conversations with revenue leaders, interviews that give me a lot of insight into topics like this, and really heard a thread that kind of went throughout all those conversations that I'm really interested to kind of share with everybody here today, as well as, you know, conversations with our customers about some of their challenges around Deal Desk. So really, really excited to get that started.
Wonderful. Yeah. So my name is Pete Kazanji, and I'm one of the founders of Atrium HQ and Modern Sales Pros. So I have a background in go-to-market, go-to-market leadership. My previous company was a recruiting company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. Wrote a book on early stage sales called Founding Sales around in 2015 or so. And I'm just like a super fanboy customer of RevOps. And for, I think I want to say like 18 months now or 16 months now. Anyway, I'm a huge process optimizer guy. And anything that can like extract like brain damage and inefficiency out of the sales motion, whether it's like analytics, which is what we work on, or like paper process, I'm like all about it. So I'm super pumped to talk about like this really nerdy topic today.
It's gonna be a fun one. I think we've got some good horror stories for like what happens when you get this wrong as well. But just a few housekeeping notes for everyone. We've got these amazing panelists for about until the top of the hour. So please do use the Q&A panel. Connect with these folks on LinkedIn. They'll be happy to keep the conversation going. And the other part on this, before somebody asks, this session will be recorded. It'll be up on the MSP YouTube channel about 24 hours after we complete our session here today. So, gentlemen, I want to just set the agenda for this. We had a great, really vibrant and exciting conversation about this a couple weeks ago. But today, for our audience, we're going to be going through a few different topics. We're going to start talking about the deal desk and how to make sure that you can set that deal desk up to be able to close the deals faster. We're then going to dive into any tools or tips or tricks that we have to identify anything that's going out that maybe isn't great. We'll talk a little bit about the collaboration and how to set the team up to collaborate effectively to make sure things move along. And then finally, last but certainly not least, it's not enough just that they close. It's also getting the new customers provisioned, set up, and all of that. So with that, I want to actually just jump into our first topic here. And Adam, let's start with you on this because you've probably got the best perspective on it. But when you think about setting up your deal desk to close deals faster, how do you set it up? How should we think about getting that ready to roll?
Yeah. I like to start with like framing the environment that you're in. So if you are in an environment where you have a large team, like 5, 6 sales teams that you're working with, or you're working with a single shop, there are different ways to do this. I think about it as like, what's the material impact of every deal that you work on, and what's that process behind that material impact that you want to do? And so it's really like deal desk is all about teamwork, working together and building the right process workflow in the group. So I always recommend that like if you have high ACV deals, or you have this high material impact or COGS, that you build actual documentation into your company and train your team when they first start out. Like they know how to talk to deal desk, they know how to create this stuff. Some of the past experiences I've had was just create a template, create something for them to quickly fill out to really help them speed things up. So that give them the questions up front. You don't have to do retraining on every time you do a process change. But for those small ones, it's about automation. It's actually about like, what are the guardrails that you really want to roll out? And so that's the key to success there. And actually, if you can keep that one going for as long as possible, you may not need these rigorous processes. These ones are created mainly because deal desks are added down the road.
Yeah, I think I read a great blog post the other day, I think it was from First Round, about the value of documentation and how it's like a little bit right now, but can set you up for success for the long term because it forces you to think and also educate. But Pete, I know you've got a lot of perspective on this from both what you're doing with Atrium right now and as just a guy who's been around a lot of early stage companies. Any tips or tricks to set this up to make it?
Yeah, for sure. So I think like my perspective comes from the like 0 to 20 sales rep area. And I think kind of like the biggest thing there with respect to deal desk would be like do it as soon as possible. And what we mean by that, I think the problem is like there's this phrase like deal desk. You're like, oh, well, that's like there's a human, right? There's like a desk and there's like a human who sits at it, and that's the deal desk. And it's like, no, it's more like a state of mind, right? Where it's like it is someone's job to have things routed to him or her, and then they like authenticate. They either A, put the proposal together, or B, they authenticate a proposal that's been put together. Or whatever, like how much of the stack they do, it's someone's job. Right? Versus it being kind of like 6-year-old swarm ball, like you ever watch like 6-year-olds play soccer, right? And so like at Atrium, before we were RevOps customers, like the first step there was a pricing calculator in a Google Sheet, right? And that was like a little bit of documentation, and each rep had their own like tab, right? So they wouldn't stomp on each other's calculations, right? Of course, like maintaining that was a huge pain in the ass. But at least it was like some guardrails. And then they would and then we had a template over here in like a Google Doc that was like hyperlinked from that, and they had to fill that out, and they sent it to me, and it had a special subject line and and that was good because it was like it avoided some brain damage and what have you. But then then the next thing was like when we deployed actual automation in the form of RevOps. Well, now the reps do a lot of that stuff, but they do it in RevOps, but it still routes through me, right? And like so part of my deal deskness has been like sublimated to like all of them, and also like the automation of the software. But there's still someone whose job it is to like be the linchpin there to make sure that like things aren't going off the rails. So like the high order bit here is like make it someone's job, even if it's just a slice of their job.
Yeah, it seems like the important part there too is back to that documentation and automation, like get it documented, make sure it's easy for the reps to help themselves not screw it up, even though they probably will.
We'll try every way.
And make sure you've got, I was just thinking about the calculator, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure there was a bunch of formulas in there, and I'm sure an AE definitely just put something right on in one of those.
Oh yeah, more on that later.
And Mark, you've got a pretty awesome perspective on this too, not just from what you're doing with RevOps, but you've been working on an ebook with some really visionary thought leaders here. What have you seen as trends or themes kind of coming out of that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and kind of piggybacking on what Pete had said earlier. Over the last 12 months, I've been interviewing a lot of revenue leaders. First of all, I apologize. I have a bit of a frog in my throat today, so I know I sound a little raspy, but feeling great, feeling fine. These days, you gotta like clarify that. Yeah, so I had all these interviews, and one of the things that I really noticed is that oftentimes companies actually have a deal desk process. They're not even really aware of it. It might not have the formal name of it. It might not be formally structured, but there isn't essentially a process. And what's really important is to maybe not formalize the name of it, but create a pretty solid structure around it. And do that early on, even if it's not an immediate need today. If you don't get it out of the way today, it's going to be a much bigger headache later on, because as your company scales and into velocity sales, you have more deals going out, you're going to be dealing with all sorts of issues down the road, like Pete had mentioned, and we can hear some, I'm sure, horror stories from everybody about that. So even if it's not formal and you don't have a deal desk manager with that title, pulling together an A team within the company to deal with all of those issues, and doing it today, and then maybe down the road kind of formalizing it with somebody with the title deal desk is super important.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that actually dovetails into this great live question we have in from Michael Sanders. And Michael's question is, when hiring for Deal Desk, what would you say are some of the really important skills or experiences to prioritize? And any tips on the actual interview process for somebody in the Deal Desk? And I think it's great. Adam, let's start with you on this, and then Pete and Mark, feel free to hop in afterwards.
Yeah, one of the best skills here for when you bring on someone full-time for it is actually having them understand pricing and packaging and how that connects together with the customer's value, and having a good sense of what that means. So when discounting comes in and they're asking a question, can I discount this? That they have a good idea about, like, is this really the right thing we should do for the business as well as the customer?
Right.
And then some of those other interview questions afterwards are just going to be really go do an exercise with them, go through like a mock interview about a Deal Desk and see how they would interact. I think those are really helpful. We've done those in other types of roles before, and they really help kind of shape what the response is going to be.
Nice. I have nothing to add here. I've never hired a Deal Desk person.
I mean, I would add that you would want somebody that has the experience, right? You know, and has worked at teams where there's that cross team collaboration. You know, we always talk about alignment as this kind of ultimate goal of revenue operations, and Deal Desk is kind of the culmination of that alignment. It becomes kind of the conductor of the different kind of sections in the symphony between finance and sales and even product. And so somebody that's done that, somebody who can be kind of the general and kind of deal with multiple teams that may have differing goals and motivations and incentives, and making sure everyone has full alignment on those incentives.
Yeah.
I think both great points there. I love the alignment piece. And I think, Adam, it's something too that you said I want to highlight just for folks, is that understanding of like how pricing and packaging aligns to where a customer derives value from. There's a really great blog post, I think it was from the team at Andreessen, where it's your business is not my effing spreadsheet. If you're too far off in spreadsheet land, you may not be associated with the outcomes the customers are unlocking, and ultimately that's the only way the business is going to grow. So let's actually talk about how this can go off the rails a little bit. I think, you know, personally, I had a very, very smart sales rep at one point in time who figured out at my previous life, the way we would calculate ARR for commissions was based on the 12th month of the deal, whatever that MRR was multiplied by 12. So amazingly, we would have deals that would come in that would be like nothing for 11 months. And then, boom, it would be a 300, 400, 500K deal. So that's something I've experienced before, where like it's a situation where stuff can get a little out of control. But Mark, I know you've been having a lot of conversations here. What are some things that you can do to kind of stop, maybe bad quotes or things that would be damaging to the business from going out before they go out?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really important is what we talk about in terms of pricing guardrails. And, this is one of the main reasons that RevOps, the product, is in existence, is that we're providing these kind of guardrails in which you can set rules around the types of discounts and the amount of discounts that can be done, and automate certain levels of approvals, or make sure that things that go outside certain rules are sent for approvals to a manager. So what's really important, I think, in terms of creating velocity sales, is establishing those kind of guardrails in terms of pricing, but also giving the flexibility to a sales rep in order to be flexible and be kind of think outside the box in terms of the deals that they're creating, and not having to go back and forth all the time, but also making sure that, like Richard was talking about, that you get no kind of situation in which people are fudging the numbers, or their incentives are, to do things that may be not aligned with the company's incentives, and make sure that things don't get flagged at the end and then have to be redone. Those are kind of nightmare scenarios. So really kind of establishing those guardrails in terms of pricing, however you do it, is really important, but making sure that you give sales reps the flexibility that they need.
Yeah, and I think that no customer ever wants to hear, oh no, we sent you a bad quote, right? Like that's like the worst possible experience there. Pete, what have you ever had anything like that happen?
Never, never. No, so we had this hilarious. In retrospect, it's hilarious. So we have this, so Atrium has like, north of 200 customers right now. We work with really great folks, and we have like, the good news is that like everyone really loves working with us, and because we have this organization that we had the situation with, they're like a 3-year customer at this point, but I think it was in like year 1 of their contract. There had been like some negotiation going back and forth, and what had happened was the rep, this is before we deployed RevOps, even though the rep had been doing the work in the pricing calculator, because it was like end of the quarter or whatever, it started doing some cowboy math in the template, right? Someone was like, oh, can we get a discount for XYZ or whatever? Like, oh, like we'll do the reference one or whatever. And so like we modified, like we agreed on it and then modified and then didn't like cascade the math through the order form, and ended up charging them like $7K more than because I like the line item amount was correctly discounted, but then the math didn't cascade, and so it like went through signature, everyone was happy. Sorry, went through me, so my bad. Went through signature, right? Went through finance, got paid, right? Got paid, and then we come up on renewal and we're like, and we're like, wait, I guess there's a contract credit here. And so I think what like that just goes to show you is that like even someone who's like as anal as me and had the Google Sheet in place, and in order to like avoid defect, nature will find a way, right? And that's what happened, right? Because it's like I'm always texting with Adam about this like end of the quarter or whatever. I'm just like, RevOps is my favorite video game. You send contracts out, they come back signed. But the thing is, like at the end of the quarter, the end of the month, like you're running and gunning, and like people are doing like up like crazy shit because they're just trying to get things across the line. And so that's like really where like the guardrails become important, because like the rep who made that error, he wasn't like being like malfeasant. It was just a boo-boo, right? Because he had like 4 other deals that he was trying to get done. And so I think that was at the point where my our head of customer success was like, really? And I was like, RevOps. And I think this was like, this is like 16 or 18 months ago. And that's why I was just like, and I think a lot of organizations will do this. They forestall doing like a CPQ project because they hear all these horror stories, thanks to like SteelBrick and Salesforce CPQ and whatever. We're like, oh, I'm going to forestall doing this because it's going to take 6 months and it's going to be a disaster. And like, I think that's what's so powerful about like modern quote to cash is that it's not that. Like, I think, like Adam, this was before you guys had like sales reps, I want to say, but I think it took us like 2 hours to set it up. We did like two Zoom things, and it was just like ding, 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 ding. And it was like, cool, we're never going to have that brain damage again. Never, 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 never. So like all's well that ends well, but and I'm glad it was like a good catalyzing thing. But in retrospect, when I talk with like, companies like I'm an investor in or I advise or whatever, I'm just like, get that, like there's no reason not to do this, because just like the friction of getting it set up is just so stupidly low, and you're going to save yourself all kinds of stupid brain damage. So sorry, sermon complete, but like it obviously there's scar tissue there.
It's all right, Pete. Let it all out. We're here for you. And I would also say, if you're deploying Salesforce CPQ in 6 months and you're getting it right on the first 6 months, like kudos to you, because that's a very special thing right there. But Adam, I know you've seen some things that are pretty common that maybe get left out in that, like Pete was saying, in that kind of cowboy run and gun end of quarter weird stuff starts to happen. What are some advice that you would have for the audience here?
Yeah. So it's interesting is like, especially when you're a younger team and you're trying to move quickly, the thing that gets overlooked is those important strategic questions about the clauses. And when we were interviewing a bunch of people before we built our product, we found a number of people were missing certain T's and C's in their contracts. And one person had such big regret. They actually told us like 80% of their contracts did not have permission to use the logo after 2 years of business. And it just became so problematic for them. Like they were like, how do we go back and go get the permission? Do we ask forgiveness and just use the logo? Like all these questions came up in their business process. And you usually, you think about a contract, you think about getting the pricing and packaging right and getting the discounting all approved, but you're trying to run quickly. It's hard to know, did you include the right terms or did you remove the right terms for the right reasons? And so it's actually why we ended up building RevOps's legal Lego blocks. So you can like pick and choose which ones you want to include, which ones are approvable, auto approvable, things like that. Those things actually really help aid the protection for these people who are trying to move quickly and prevent these mistakes from happening.
Well, and it's something too where it's almost like a different variation of I've made my copy of the pricing calculator. Well, I've got that saved on my desktop, and who cares that
Yeah.
that contract was from 2019.
Exactly. It's like when they start to add clauses that are custom, you want to know, and so like just turn on approval requests for those and get
Right.
down and get them the brass tacks. And that's where Deal Desk really helps. It's like, oh yeah, we can help you mold this. And sometimes we actually heard from really cool customers that they run experiments every 6 weeks where they add new terms or add new prices, and it actually extends out their process and workflow. And so it lets you find the best fit in your contracts.
Interesting. It's going from something where it's like, hey, this is almost, this is going to slow down my process, or certainly not speed it up, to something where no, I'm actually finding new ways to get, have a valuable negotiation. I love it.
Yeah, turn a problem into a solution. Yeah.
Yeah, that's slick. Well, we've touched on this. We've touched on this a little bit. So we've talked about some horror stories. We've talked about kind of how to set Deal Desk up effectively. Each one of you mentioned this idea of collaboration, making sure that collaborating, keeping the trains running on time, all of that. How can you create that environment to make sure that your team is really optimized for selling at the pace that you need to? And Pete, let's start with you on this part.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you can do is like reduce kind of like finicky process brain damage for your reps as much as possible. And so like an example of that would be, so like add process in order to avoid defect and failures and what have you, but then think about how you can like make that fast. So as an example, one of the reasons why my reps really enjoy RevOps is because like everything's templated and they can just like bust something out. So one of the things that we talk about in our sales organization is we call it calendar is destiny, right? So if you have like a 45-minute call with a customer, you're gonna have a 15-minute block beforehand, 15 to 30-minute block beforehand for pre-call planning and just getting yourself ready and like what's the point of this call, what are we trying to exit with, and then but then importantly afterwards you have the same thing, right? Because if you get off the call and they're like, great, send me the quote, you need to be like, tomorrow they may not say that for whatever reason, because hashtag sales. And so like what you want to be able to do is like the rep needs to like get off that call and be able to be like, boom, I'm going to send this out immediately. And so they can just like jump into a template, be like click, like pull the data in from Salesforce, click, and then send it off for approval. Or if it doesn't require approval because it's just like super duper plain vanilla, they're just like click, boom, done. And then they're off to their next call. They're super pumped on that, as compared to like, going into Pete's magical pricing calculator, and then like cross-porting that information over into the order form, the Google Docs order form, and blah, 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 blah. So that's been something like, if you can make it such that you can get stuff out of the way and reduce defect, oh man, like that's super rad, right? And that's why my reps really like it too, because they're like, oh, it's like my video game too. Money's gonna come back here soon.
And how much of that, in terms of just, I want to double click into that a little bit, Pete. How much of that is a training component where it's like, hey, reps, this is the rules of the road of what is and isn't feasible or possible, versus it being some of the tooling as well? Because tools obviously play an important part of that.
I mean, our pricing is not complicated, right? So Atrium, I would say with us, it's largely just like there was training that then just got like kind of abstracted into the software. So like Atrium, for instance, like it's primarily a manager tool, right? It helps SDR and AE managers use data to better manage their teams. And so we price on a per manager seat basis, right? So it's kind of like, did you want 1 corn dog or 2 corn dogs or 3 corn dogs, right? It's not like, oh, but like then there's that add-on and and then like this and so I think in our case, it's just like because the pricing is like, fairly straightforward, just like optimizing because our ASP is like 15K too, because the types of organizations we work with have anywhere between like 5 to like 100 reps. Because those are usually the type of organizations that have like really heavy BI implementations. So like it's about like getting it out, right? And part of it, and that's another reason why kind of we have kept our pricing pretty simplistic, but I think it bears pretty substantial fruit because then you can just put it into a nice, quote to cash automation system and just like and have like 3 extra meetings or 4 extra meetings a week.
Yeah, there's a part of it. I love that point of like, yeah, we're gonna help the AEs and sales team help themselves by making sure we've got the right guardrails in the tooling versus I made a copy of the magical pricing calculator. Adam, what are some of the things that you've seen to really set your teams up for success, especially as you think about more of the like high velocity selling?
Yeah. A lot of it is, I think, actually starts with the culture within sales and how you organize the sales team to be motivated at the high level. Where if you have a company that sells software or any sort of SaaS service to multiple different industries and there's different buying behaviors, you really want to segment towards the packaging that works for those buying behaviors. And so if you could think about like you have one team on your group that's a velocity sales team, they are motivated to quickly get things signed. Their packaging and their pricing and all the other pieces that kind of fall into play, they can run off that playbook and they get to choose what tools make sense to them to quickly do things. When you add a lot of process, it's going to slow you down. But if you find the right thing for velocity, then it's going to move quickly. And so if the team can be running off scoreboards, leaderboards, all these other concepts for velocity sales, it really helps like move them through the needle there. And from our perspective, like when we built RevOps and founded it, this was the kind of team that we were really thinking about, like, why is CPQ so slow? Well, it's for finance people, it's not for salespeople. And so if we built a tool for salespeople, they'll move quickly and they'll get it done. They want to close. So that's kind of the idea of like, yeah, we're great for those velocity sales groups. I actually think that it'd be also good for those enterprise folks to move a little faster too.
Well, I think one thing I neglected to add earlier is that like you can get faster too. Like when we first started out in with RevOps, we like the first things first is we just had like our various SKUs that were in there, and we actually didn't have, because I just like needed to get it done and make it such that like when somebody changed the number of SKUs, like the math would cascade appropriately, like that story we talked about. But then that we hadn't yet deployed the oh god, I'm gonna call it something like the tiers, the pricing tiers or whatever, discount tiers or whatever. I forget what the big hit term for that is, but and that was something that was even like more impactful because like one of my AEs would be like, and the customers want to know that too. So that if someone's like, yeah, we want 8 seats, right? So like, and the rep has to like then go and do math on that somewhere else, saying like looks at a pricing sheet over here, and then puts it in over here in the line item. Yeah, there's like a potential like opportunity for defect there. But the bigger thing though is it's like it just adds cognitive overhead, and like now I got to open that other document and like try to go find it and whatever, versus just like 8 price changes or like unit price changes, math cascades. And so I think we ended up deploying that like 6 months after. I'm sure you guys like customer success process now, like would have never let somebody like me, like your CSM would have been like, no, we're going to put the discounts in here now. But I think what was great was like, we already had some good automation going, some good guardrails, and then we added more in order to like make it even like slicker for the AEs. And they were even like more pumped on that.
A lot of goodness there in terms of removing friction and increasing velocity. Yeah. Mark, I know you've been having a lot of these conversations. What are you seeing in terms of getting organizations to fly faster?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the collaboration piece, I think what's missed often is we make this assumption that collaboration is an internal process as opposed to both internal and external. And we see a lot of our customers creating this kind of collaboration, a live collaboration on their deals with the customer on the phone. We had a customer that did this and was able to increase their sales velocity and actually save, 6x the amount of time for doing other sales processes by being able to collaborate kind of live on a quote and kind of configuring it that way. And so I think that in order to sell, with this velocity sale, the consideration of collaboration should be both internal, kind of on the deal desk and the stuff we talked about, but also external, collaborating with the buyer. I wanted to take a step back and talk about a little bit about kind of RevOps as a product, because we got an inbound question here about if RevOps as a tool is useful for startups or only enterprise. And it's definitely useful for startups. We see a lot of startups with interest and value in our product. We also kind of started a recent program that you can check out specifically for startups. You can go to revops.io/pricing/startups to learn more about that. But I wanted to plug that because there was a question I think Susan had asked about that. So glad to take that offline, Susan, if you wanted to reach out at mark.revops@revops.io, but you can check that out.
Yeah, and I think there's a bunch of goodness here, and we've hit on a lot. The last piece, and this is often overlooked, like, cool, we closed the deal.
Yeah.
Now what? There's a bunch of stuff, big and small, that happens that can make a customer feel really excited or make a customer feel like, what the heck? My favorite example is going through discovery again with your CSM after the deal is closed. Like, that's never happened before. But let's think about this from, we've talked to Deal Desk, we've talked about internal collaboration, all that. Think about how can we automate some of the post-close operations? What are some places for folks to start, or some things to think about to make this quicker and seamless for those new customers who've just signed on that dotted line? Mark, let's start with you here.
Yeah, so we talk about the post-close operations as like this idea, we have operations and automations across various different functions in the go-to-market, but I think this post-close operation becomes like a real friction point where there's this kind of manual. You take stuff from the quote and get it all the way through the billing, and one thing is missing and everything gets messed up, and all the work you did to create that velocity kind of gets ruined. So we kind of like want this idea of the close to billing to even account provisioning, and getting rid of all those copy and paste errors and avoid error prone activities, and in integrating the closing the deal to creating account, as well as the entitlements that are in a quote, and being able to kind of bring that through into provisioning of an account, and speed up the assigning of a success person to the new account based on what was included in the quote that was signed, and automating that. Automation is a gift. We talk about this kind of low code, no code world that we live in, and there's so many tools. But what's really important is creating this data integrity throughout the process, from the quote all the way through billing to account, all of that stuff. There needs to be integrity throughout. Again, not to kind of become repeat myself over and over again, but this is a piece of what RevOps offers on the automating the post-close process through APIs and integrations within the platform to be able to do this. And it's really important because you put all that work into a sale, and then things get messed up on the billing side, or the account is provisioned incorrectly, and you don't have a happy customer. So it's really important not to let the ball drop after you close.
And this is something too where, Pete, I know you've got experience on this more from the process side, but what are some of the things that you're doing to make that post-close a better experience?
Yeah, so I think that we haven't yet gotten the automation side of things. Like, I think that we're still kind of in the process and documentation, 'cause that's a good development pattern, or maturity pattern. It's first start with the outlines of a process that has documentation, and then later on you can codify that into software or whatever. And so I think I've kind of described that so far as relates to how we deployed quote to cash, starting out as kind of a pricing, essentially a pricing calculator without tiering and kind of guardrails and what have you. And actually, just to the the question earlier about like, is this okay for startups? I'm like, dude, why would you not deploy this as soon as you have a couple of reps? Like all you're doing is just like gut punching yourself to not do it. Like the notion of like, oh man, CPQ is such a pain in the ass to deploy, and thus I'll hold my nose and avoid. That was true in the past, and that was the right thing to do, was to like forego that because of the startup cost. Now it's just like, what are you talking about? This is like a couple of hours, and like I guarantee you it's going to save you like all sorts of stupid brain damage when you have a defect, not to mention all the rep stuff. But then there's like the post-close automation stuff. We haven't gotten into that yet, so that's very manual. But what we do there is like we have a AECSM. We call it a handoff dossier, because when you use a French word, it sounds more important, and then people use it. So we have a handoff dossier, which essentially carries forward the disco. So like, here's the reason they bought, here are the use cases they want, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's all like, it's a Google Doc or whatever. And that's, it's an opportunity for the AE to like take his or her brain and like put it in here, versus just kind of like the slapdash, like close OneNotes. Okay, here you go. So, it takes like a half hour, but you can imagine kind of like that turning into fields, going somewhere, going into the CPQ system, blah, 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 blah. So we haven't like fully automated that yet, because we're in the we're in the process plus documentation version of that. And that's probably something, because I only have 8 AEs right now, but I can imagine when I get up to like 20 or like 40 AEs, and we're like, closing multiple deals a day, that'll become more important.
Great. It's great perspective, and I love the idea too. Call it a dossier. See if it gets used a little bit more. It's like this is very fancy. I love it.
It's very important.
It's important. Adam, what are you saying in terms of the key fields and stuff that should kind of put in one place and away they go? Oh, Adam, you're muted.
Put myself on mute. All the traffic are going by. But I gotta say, dossier, it's a good name idea. I might take that. That's awesome. So, so coming back to like the post-close and fields, I think there's two schools of thought. The first school of thought is there's a traditional model. You want to move your signed contract into billings. Capture as much as you need to do billings. Modern world is you want success with the value delivered nearly instantaneously after they close, meaning you want to give them the software the minute they sign that contract. And that requires collecting more data on the contract itself. And the salesperson needs to figure out like, what do they need to collect? When you templating this information up front and requiring it for the salesperson to fill out, it makes it super simple. And they can just initiate the entitlements after the close is happening. We have some really cool customers that have completely automated all these processes. And we kind of think about it, it's like at some point in time, people should be wanting to send a gift after the deal is closed automatically. Be able to like
connect into Sendoso, connect into Sendoso. And because that's funny, we do that. Because wow, okay. That's a really cool idea, because so we use Sendoso on the AESDR side and on the CSM side. And one of the things that we do is we actually send a bunch of collateral, like, flow charts of like metrics. And then we also send everybody a copy of Cracking the Sales Management Code, because we're like we're like advancing data-driven management in the sales world. So one of the ways that we do this, here's the Bible. You have to read it so you can come pray at the altar at Atrium that you just bought. But like the point is, we're trying to like bring that along, and like the CSMs do that manually right now. That's funny.
Yeah. And when you're doing 100+ orders a month, imagine the amount of time that is saved on the team.
Yeah, I think there's especially as we move into that velocity world where it's like I'm swiping my credit card, or maybe I have 1 or 2 conversations with the AE, I'm ready to roll. Mark, Adam, I think one thing that would be helpful here, you kind of rattled through a list of a whole bunch of stuff that should be captured automatically. Can you go through that just one more time, maybe for those in the seats in the back that missed it? Because I think there was a bunch of good data that you laid out there.
Yeah. There's a few things that are good. First of all, in every order form, you want to capture the billing details. You want to know the email address. You want to know something that's always missing is like, who is the contact that the contract should be made out to versus who is paying for the contract. And having that separation is really key. And trying to get it up front is super, super hard and important. But if you can make them fields that you can collect that signing time through our DocuSign integration, or requiring the salesperson to fill it out that helps to automate the rest of the processes down the road. And then there's just the account fields. What is the identifier for that account that is going to be lit up? What are the features that were purchased? People like to use SKUs as a way to organize entitlements in our platform. And so if you create a SKU, you can create a set of features that are organized under that, and that can be automated. You can connect that back to Salesforce, or you can connect it to your own systems. A lot of our customers use it for that purpose of just like activating entitlements afterwards, which we were just talking about. So there's a ton of details there. You really, it's to your heart's content. If you have some sort of custom process like upload an image or other things like that, they're really exciting.
I think like what Rich said, something really interesting there is like, you've got this, well, there's kind of two things that are kind of like conundrums. One is that like customers take forever to sign. Forever. And then as soon as they sign, they're like, cool, like where's my software? Right. And so like, I don't think that expectation is not going to change anytime soon. So I think that like, to the extent that you can deliver on that, it's important. The other thing too is that from a customer success standpoint, you kind of have this like golden time period where people like have like peak excitement about the solution that they just purchased. And like it kind of like tails off. It just is what it is. You're like, you just paid us like 40 grand. Like, why are you not responding to the email of the CSM? Because people, right? And so the faster you can avoid any of sort of that like dips in momentum, the better off you are. So I was just kind of like, I know that is a thing in the world that is like a pain in customer success's butt, and it's just something that has to be managed here. And I think the other thing that Rich pointed out that I was noodling on there is that, you know, when you have thin use cases, you can have self-service, right? So like Stripe isn't a good example of that, or like Zoom or Slack, and everyone talks about like PLG stuff or whatever. But sometimes like you've got like big kid software that has like an involved sales process, or needs an involved sales process, but you still have people who expect a more rapid checkout process, if you will. And so it's almost like there's like PLGs on the front end. It's kind of like adopt and like see utility quickly, but then there's kind of like the back end of that, which is like, hey, some solutions resist the ability to like just self-explain themselves or whatever, but that doesn't mean that they can't have like instantaneous transaction.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like the unbundling of like PLG. It's like, yeah, you have a heavy solution that has to be sold, but it can be really fast checkout.
No, I think that's a great point, and it's something where I think you know, we've seen this from Brian Halligan talking about the consumerization of the enterprise buying experience, right? Where everyone's head nodding. I literally saw a thing this weekend, 3D printed houses that you can buy online. Already the
like,
development, you don't even have to go. And now think about that. That's a house.
It's like the Tesla stuff, right?
Exactly. So even though it's a house and it's this big capital investment, I still should be able to buy it quickly. It doesn't mean I'm going to get that utility right away. And that friction sets you up so that you're like Pete, like you're saying, that honeymoon period, removing that friction from the purchase and then having a pretty seamless process of what happens afterwards, where I'm not going through discovery again after I buy it. Like, oh, okay, this is Mark. He's your CSM. And Mark says, hey, Rich, why'd you buy the software? Like that combined with a smooth transact process gives you the opportunity to deploy the rest of the supporting resources on it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I can add to this. I had a conversation with Sean from Drift. He's a really great operations guy. And we talked about this idea that, you know, especially during COVID, when we're all at home and we're all shopping on Amazon, right? Mark, the B2C buyer, doesn't take off his B2C buyer hat when he goes to be the B2B buyer. We all have these expectations of that buying experience that we got from, you know, Amazon or Shopify or whatever. And now we all expect that, especially in, you know, in a product-led world where it's the end user rather than potentially kind of an executive making that decision. We expect that kind of very seamless checkout experience as users. And so it's interesting how the change in B2C buying experience has really influenced the B2B experience as well.
And I think there's a lot of trends like that you start to bubble up, even just in the sales discipline in general. The expectation around video and the comfort level with using video as a prospecting tool, that's the way top of the funnel for this. But it's the same thing. We're consuming so much of it in our B2C life that it's not a big deal that Adam doesn't have, perfect lighting, or Pete said and a bunch of times in the video, because that's all I'm doing is watching 4 hours of TikTok a day when I'm done with work. Not me personally, but you can imagine. Folks, we've got our panelists here for just a few more minutes before we start to wrap up. They're amazing, as you've heard, but please do throw. We've got some RevOps specific questions in there, Mark. I see you typing away, but for other questions about this, you've kind of heard what we've got from an expertise standpoint. Please do feel free to throw those our way in the Q&A panel. One thing that I think is interesting about this kind of topic area, and I want to get perspective on this. We didn't prep for it, so I'm going to put everybody on the spot for it. When is the right time to hire that deal desk person, right? Pete, you had mentioned like there's somebody kind of doing it. It lives inside all of us for a while, but at some point you get to a point where like, hey, we need somebody to do this as part of their full-time role. And I'd love perspectives from Adam. Let's start with you on this. But like, when is that tipping point where it's like, I need somebody full time to do this? Or what have you seen out there?
It's a decision tree. So, do you have a RevOps person? Yes. Okay. What scale are you at? How many deals in the pipeline do you have? What's breaking in the process? All these things. I'll give you like the senior engineer response. It depends. If you don't have this RevOps person, go get the RevOps person, because they're going to go and help you define like what's the best fit for that deal desk person. So I'm kind of giving you a different answer there, contrarian.
No, I think it's 100% acceptable to say it depends. I think we had another session on a topic similarly where it was like, cool, we're just going to use it like a swear jar. Like every time you say it depends, it's like 25 cents or whatever. So great perspective on that. Pete, as someone who's scaling an organization, let's talk about Atrium in particular. Like what do you see as like the point in time where you're gonna be like, damn it, I need somebody to do this?
I think I have it. The startups that I've run haven't been like at the scale where we've necessitated that. But I think like after my last software company was acquired by Monster, we kind of saw this because they had a deal desk. And I think what it kind of comes down to, similar to what Adam was saying, is like, what is the complexity of the process? Like, do you have a lot of like, are you high ASP? And thus there are a lot of terms and everything's being redlined, and you have internal legal, right? And like that needs to be coordinated, and you have XYZ, right? Like, so the more like humans that are touching the deal internally, I think that that levers that up more quickly. Like in our case, we're not going to need a deal desk. Like I'll probably be at like 30 reps or like 40 reps, and we're not going to need a deal desk because RevOps, because our simplicity, like our pricing simplicity is kind of lends itself to that. And also I've automated away a ton of the like stuff that would have otherwise been necessitated. I mean, this is the power of like of opinionated software like this. It's not dissimilar to like what we do at Atrium, where it's like we have customers who are like, oh yeah, I did, I forewent hiring another sales operations analyst for a year because like now all the managers can give themselves all the reports and whatever they want. Similarly, like it's funny, I'm like, why would I hire a deal desk person? I don't see anything becoming a problem as I go up to like, instead we would just extend RevOps, right? Like, oh, that post-close automation process, rather than having somebody like, a 26-year-old who's like running around having to like chase all that stuff down. It's just going to be like, right? So yeah, I think if you have stuff that resists automation, then that's probably where that shows up. But otherwise, you can deploy like opinionated software that has like good automation stuff.
It feels like a good framework to look at this would be on maybe one axis, there's like complexity of deals. And then on the other, it's just volume. At some point in time, there's some time horizon where you have a bunch of complex deals and you're doing a lot of them. Like you need a human to be looking at those. And maybe even if you only have a few high ASP deals, it's worth it to have a human look at them.
There's
Last,
another, there's another dimension here, and I think that would be kind of your sales motion, right? So a lot of companies
Yeah.
are not, you know, there's the sales led, the traditional sales led model is giving
Yeah.
way in a lot of places to a product led model, and I
Yeah.
think it might change the calculus of when you would implement a deal desk, depending on the complexity of the deal. But yeah, you know, I think there's a world we live in now where things more and more can be automated, and so you can have kind of an automated type deal desk situation. So yeah, I guess my answer is also it depends.
it's good. And I think a lot of great perspective on this. Last question that we're going to take live before we go to wrap up here from Lisa Kelly. So for deal desk or pricing desk, especially in maybe larger organizations, where should the role live? Finance versus ops? And now I know the answer for this is it depends. But what are some of the pros and cons that that we should think through on finance versus ops of where it should live? And Adam, I want to get started with you on this one. I know you've probably seen great
Yeah.
and terrible examples of both.
Well, I mean, small company, it all starts at the founder level. They are the deal desk. But at the larger companies, it's traditionally put into finance. And the reason is to protect the interests of the company at the and be able to evaluate things for a larger picture, like meeting the quarter's objective, et cetera. If you put it into ops, it actually, what it does is it unpacks and makes it a little bit more fair, not only to a company, but also the customer. And so finance doesn't really speak towards the customer in most traditional organizations. And so if you put it in the ops, you're going to have sales and marketing, but also working with you on giving you the best process for speaking in the customer's shoes. So walking the customer's shoes. So that would be really helpful of you to think about it that way. It's like, if you're a product-led company, I actually think that ops is probably a better goal for you. If you're sales-led, coming back to that thing that Mark brought up earlier, finance might be the traditional approach, might be the right approach now. But if you're trying to go through like a modernization in your stack and your org, and your deal sizes are going to grow not in ACV, but in volume, then ops may be a better suit for you long term.
And it feels like either, regardless of where it lives, having a really tight hand and glove relationship between your revenue operations team and finance is going to be important anyways for comp planning and quotas and all of that as well. We're at time. That went by real fast. So thank you all so much. I mean, we're literally at time. Before we wrap up, I just want to collect kind of closing thoughts from each of you. Just last kind of single takeaway that you want the audience to leave with. And Mark, we're going to get started with you, and then we'll go Pete and Adam. So Mark, one last takeaway for the audience.
I think that, you know, we get started on this stuff today, right? So maybe, you know, I think we touched on this a little bit. Even if the need isn't immediate today and you can kind of handle a little bit of the pain, it's better to kind of deal with it today. We deal with the problem today so that you don't get the bigger headache tomorrow, you know, if we're talking about kind of getting to this velocity sales stage. So, you know, start dealing with it today and, you know, save yourself significant pain tomorrow.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest thing is if you have, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 reps all the way up to like, you know, sorry, if you have at least that, and you don't have like quote to cash deployed, there's just like no reason not to do it ASAP. Like if you've been thinking about like, oh, I should put a pricing spreadsheet together, or we need a process for this, just like jump all the way to like the answer, which is, you know, an actual automation system. And because it's just gonna like it only takes a couple of hours, it's gonna save you so much brain damage, and you will thank yourself in the future. You will thank yourself.
Good forcing function. And last but certainly not least, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an operator and you're thinking about being long for your company, and you want to bake it the right process first. Like the idea around a crawl, walk, run mantra to figure out how you should grow from 1 rep to 200 reps. You should think about tools that help you scale through that. And that way, thinking about like what are the Legos that you need in RevOps, what we do, it's all about how to provide that fabric for you guys, as well as like thinking about this deal desk process, like roll out a deal desk early, don't roll it out too late. You're going to get a lot more clarity in what's going on in the world and when your company, which always helps you improve that revenue engine. So thanks, guys.
It's a theme that we've heard before, especially for the modern operator, to really think long on their organization, not just solve today's problems, but solve today's problems with an eye on tomorrow and the day after that. We've had philosophy conversations about the best pizza being the one that's in front of you, and the deal desk is inside of all of us. We've learned that using French is actually a way to get your AEs to do things, so dossier, but also really great and thorough conversation diving into the pros and the amazing experience that you can get by setting up a deal desk correctly, horror stories and all of that. Mark, Pete, Adam, I know you're super, super busy. So on behalf of the team behind the scenes, the folks watching on YouTube, everybody who joined us here today, I want to thank you all so much and wish you a safe and wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Take
Thank
care,
you all.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.